built like a variety of like crazy software that allowed us to do that. So when it came time to, I did that a couple different times, and we're getting ready to do one in the UK in the fall, where we're going to do some really interesting things with Bluetooth technology, and we've built like kind of this weird hacked Bluetooth peer-to-peer thing. So everybody in the audience will have parts of, you know, these fragmented memories, and they'll need to work together to kind of piece it together while the movie's actually playing out. So it's pretty cool. And then the second thing that I did, Warner Brothers was releasing the film on VOD, and I knew they weren't going to do any promotion around it. So I decided I wanted to create a kind of an alternate property that loosely touched on the storyline, very slightly, of the movie. And I thought, wow, it'd be interesting to try to take what is effectively a promotion and turn it into its own IP. I wonder if I can do that. I wonder if I can build an audience around this other storyline and see if I can use it to not only promote the movie, but then ignite this whole new thing. So I did this thing called Hope is Missing, and it kind of fell under, you know, I was able to get, you know, MySpace cooperated with me, Xbox cooperated with me. At the time, Stage 6 was still a site, and the storyline was this girl keeps getting these calls at 3:07 a.m. every night from her mom, and her mom's convinced somebody's trying to kill her, and they're in the house, and then the phone goes dead. And so every night at 3:07, she keeps getting these same calls. And every time she calls the police, her mom has no recollection of anything, so she decides to go back home. And when she goes back home, she uncovers all these strange nocturnal behaviors that her mom has, and then realizes that her mother isn't alone, and then disappears. And so we come into the story through the eyes of her fiance, who basically is trying to find her, is frustrated by the process, and one day he gets this package in the mail, and basically it has all these strange, like, fucked up tapes in it, you know, and as he starts to go through them, he realizes there's these strange, like, subliminal frames in it. So he reaches out to the internet and says, you know, hey, help me decipher this. And so we kind of put it out like that, and you know, it created quite a bit of controversy in terms of it being a hoax or not a hoax and all this other stuff, but that follows a lot of the work that I do anyway from a long time ago. But basically what was really fascinating and what I think applies to this panel is that I was able to take something that was a promotional aspect for that film and turn it into its own intellectual property. So like literally it was a promotional thing, but now it's its own standalone thing, and it has funding, and it's going to be its own property, which I own. So I thought that that was kind of relevant to the discussion, because I tend to work mostly in original content that I shape and then kind of involve the kind of game world and the story world around it. You know, so.
How does that play with everybody else? The work that you do that's you know, tied into another property, is it promotional or is it original? Like, how do you define that? Now we're
well, I think, I mean, from my point of view, ARGs are their own entertainment. Like, I think if you're doing an ARG, part of what you have to figure out is how are you going to advertise this ARG? How are you going to properly seed this? Because in itself, it's a sort of a standalone form of entertainment. It tells a story, it has an arc, it you know, uses different media to tell it. I know that it obviously is being used as promotion. So, you know, legally I don't think there's been a court case that's defined that. You know, to say, okay, is this advertising or is this art? But in my point of view, I think it will pass the test of this is entertainment and art on its own.
You just asked the question, how are you going to advertise that ARG? Do you mean how do you advertise it or how do you fund it?
Advertising, like, in the sense of, I think for a lot of these ARGs, you need to find what is it that's going to make people watch it.
Sure.
Right? And it's not necessarily, if you build it, they will come. It's, if you build it properly, they'll be interested.
Okay, what does that mean?
I think it has to have elements that work as a seeding strategy, right? So it has to pique people's curiosities. It has to have enough rabbit holes to draw in an audience. It can't just live in one space. It can't just interest a small niche of the community and bore the rest. It has to sort of like reach a broad audience. And it has to be accessible in different levels. It has to be accessible to people who are really hardcore puzzle solvers, as well as being accessible to people who just want to walk in and try to figure out what it is you're talking about.
I mean, sometimes it's quite hard actually making that that connection or making that leap. Gamers who are the core, the computer gamers who are the core people that Violet's Dream should really be aimed at. When we had our initial meetings with the company that funded us, they specifically said they wanted it as a fingerprint-less sort of project that not only doesn't tie back to the funding company, but not necessarily targeted at the people who would actually buy the computer game at the end of the day. And that's why we worked out several drops of gold, so that ARG players would most definitely get at least 60 to 70% of the fines before the real gamers, the computer gamers, actually come on board. So at some point we're going to have an overlap with the marketing machine to actually bring gamers into the ARG so they actually understand what's going on. And even at the tail end, when people do play, and this is public knowledge at this point, when people do start playing the actual game, the computer game, to find whatever's hidden in the computer game, they have to go through the entire narrative, which will at that point be about 7 months worth of stuff, which has spawned, will have spawned in excess of about 20 to 30 different sites, personalities, telephone numbers, offices that have already set up that have nothing to do with the actual computer game.
Right. Wow. So, yeah.
I just wanted to ask, like, because I think there's an intellectual property question in that mix, in terms of like when you're doing something that obviously is that extensive and as a work for hire role, but you're extending a world. You know, I mean, I do my own stuff, but I wonder, how does that fit in for you guys? I mean, how do you balance that? You know, like when a client's paying, can you splinter that off? Like if you were going to go and take a property and you created something and you ran with it, can you do that?
No.
I mean, like, do you guys work that into the deals that you do? I mean, is that something?
That's all up for negotiation, right? It's, you know, there's different methods, and I mean, you know, the Canadian market that I work in has a different spin on that as well, where there's independent production that's supported in other ways, but it's definitely up for discussion. I mean, one thing that we talked about is, you know, some of the technology that you've been developing of being able to click on a website and hear it on the phone. You know, that may not be the work for hire content. That's actually, you know, a technology that you could use in another project or something. And so that's maybe you know, maybe it's that you hold.
Oh, no, we do that. We do license that. I guess
Well,
that's
like,
why I think about the
yeah.
IP. I just wonder in terms of the story world, like the ability to kind of carve those things away, like
Yeah.
how that works. You know, because I've done work for hire work too, but I just was a question. I didn't mean to derail us.
No. This is where it's going. I think, you know, I think we should give you a chance to talk about some of this project that you've been working on, a few projects, and specifically I've got a question about, it was mentioned that you've got, you know, different people coming in. Yomi mentioned the, you know, the alternate reality game community versus the traditional console game community. You've seen many projects like that where you're attracting an audience from another brand. Let's say, for instance, you know, 9 Inch Nails, and how do you deal with that? You've got different audiences coming to the same project.
Wow. Yeah. Ultimately, the question is, you know, how do you get them to play nice, and how do you get people with very, very different motivations to get into the same room together and not, you know, attack each other, create a really hostile environment. I honestly don't have a good answer for you. I think, I mean, way back as early as I Love Bees, working on a real huge audience problem where you've got the hardcore Halo guys and you've got the alternate reality guys, and they're all coming together and they've got to play nice, and they all have different expectations of what the project's going to be. Yeah, you just sort of wing it. I really don't have a great answer. I think that ultimately every project that we work on, every project that we try to extend into a bigger space, has to